The important point about this security first is when we create users, we have to have a corresponding user on Windows machine. The login, whether it is Windows authentication or SQL Server authentication, you need to have association, direct association at operating system level first. So therefore, as a first attempt, what we will do, we'll go to the control panel or we'll go to that server manager or user management. We need to add users. So let's go to the settings and directly work with the users and accounts. I'm working on Windows Server 2019. I'll click on accounts, and if here we have users. So let's create other users. Click on other users and add someone else to this PC. So this is where it will allow us to Microsoft Windows. No, I don't have any person sign in information. So let's do that. Create account, get email address without Microsoft account. I want to add account without Microsoft account. So I'm following the simple procedure to create a user on this machine first. Who is going to use this PC username? Let me add as Oracle user. Oracle user 1, make it a password. Let me give the password. Password don't match. Okay. My last name plus one extra character, that's a simple password. So this is Oracle user. I first created this user. Password is not matching the security. This is not done. Let me see if follows perfectly. So we have one Oracle user created now. This Oracle user will be mapped to SQL Server login or account. So let's go to the SQL Server now. We have two users available on this. So let's launch the SQL Server Management Studio. So here we are, SQL Server Management Studio. So we have two underlying additional user. If you notice, first was Sangwan, actually which I created for the lab assignment, and second is I created for this demo just now. And this walkthrough of creating users is actually going to be very comprehensive, because when you are creating the user, you will get everything. You will get a TSQL script also, you will get permissions also, roles also, everything will be visible in the same one dialog box. So let's connect first. So here we have security. Under security we have logins. In order to create the user, you click on logins and then create new login. And this is the dialog box wherein you have to fill everything, and you have comprehensive set of pages like general pages, server roles, user mapping, then securable, status, everything is there. So in the general name, you have to select the login name first, and login name is the name of the user which exists on your Windows machine. That is the prerequisite. So search on the login, click on search, type the name. I remember it is what Oracle user something. So you can click on check now and it will select that, find out that name, and it will give the full name of that qualified name, server/Oracle user. So select the user like this. Then what authentication you want to choose for this user? You have both options. If you are using Windows authentication, then you don't need any credentials to log into the SQL Server. However, if you want SQL Server authentication, you need to provide the password now corresponding to this user. So password I'm specifying here. So this is the password for this authentication. And force password policy, if you want weak password, deselect that, because expiration and other things are there. So you can remove this, because the user must change the password on next login. And if you can see, these are all optional things when we are creating. If you have a certificate authentication, then you don't need any password here. However, if you select SQL Server Authentication, so at the time of connecting to SQL Server, you will need additional password. And this is that password, SQL Server Authentication. Mapped to certificate, we can have certificate also. We'll talk about the secret certificates. Right now we don't have any, since there's no point to have certificate because we don't have any trust store here and we don't have any authentication. However, you can log in without password also using certificates. So default database, you can assign where this user will be placed. So we can assign the database also. And don't click OK, because if you want to go to other pages and check other features of for this user, you have the opportunity now. So let's go to the server roles. You are right now, this user is public. You want to give any additional server role to this. I'm going to talk about these roles, though the names are self-explanatory. For example, bulk admin, database creator, disk admin. Self-explanatory roles: security admin, server admin, setup admin, SVS admin, sysadmin, sorry, SYS admin. So you can select, for example, you want this user to manage the space, or you want this user to take care of the security. So you can decide, this is the server level, mind it, server level, not the database level. Server level activities if you want to assign to this user. Then user mapping. So what all databases you want to map it. User mapped to this login is Adventure Works. And this is the user. This will be the default schema. If you want to assign, you can assign default schema as well. So you want to assign this user to this database. If you want to give some rights on the master, you can select that now. And the role membership. For example, you have assigned this user to AdventureWorks. What role for this database you want to assign to this user, to this login? So right now it's public only and DB owner. But if you want other roles also to be assigned, like you want to give specific database access, database backup, so whatever options you select, this user will be able to perform only those tasks on the database. Securables. Securables basically take you to the fine-grained level of permission. You can select all type of objects and you can assign specific objects. For example, specific object you want to assign, check object types, like you want to select all the servers, all available roles or logins and everything. You can select that. Or if you want to select a specific object, you go to this option, all objects of type. One second, let me show. This already is tried. The server itself. All right. And then on the server, we have all these features. So this also can be given. However, I'm not selecting this. I'm not giving any permission on the server. Then status, this user permission to connect to database engine, grant or deny. Login, permission to enable. That means simple enable, disable can be done here. SQL Server Authentication. So this is the status of the user, and whatever you have done, if you want the details of this user, you can script this action and send it to a query window. Means if you want to generate a script to create this user, obviously that is always there. So click on OK, the user will be created. If there is something wrong, we will find that, no problem. It's not a valid name because it contains invalid characters. Oracle user is not a valid. What is the problem? Let's go back. So you need only the user, not the fully qualified name to be. That is something very interesting. Don't hesitate. Don't shy away from these errors, please. Read the error, go to the detail, troubleshoot it. Don't rush for somebody to rush to somebody that somebody will help you. I mean, this is not the right approach for learning. Right approach is read the message, go inside the message, and then troubleshoot it. And it is not difficult to troubleshoot. I want you to practice this, that how to troubleshoot if you get error. And for me, what I noticed, I just changed that to fully qualified name of the user, and it worked because the name was okay. I was pretty sure about the name, so it comes instant actually. So I'm just removing from the script. This is the script now, and now if I have additional user for which I want to create a login, I can do that. That is something interesting. So this is how you create the login. Similarly, server roles. So these are the default server roles. If you look at them, there are 9 server roles default. I'll explain them. And these 9 roles were coming when we were creating the user. However, if you want to create a server role, you can create yourself. A specific server role can be created here. Similarly, credentials, the audits, that is the other part. Our focus is today right now is logins, and we have these logins. If you have to change them, like Oracle user 1 or Oracle user, we selected Oracle user. If you want to change this, or Oracle user 1, I created Oracle user just now, correct? So right now on this you can send the script as create to, as drop to, as drop or drop and create to. You can directly generate. This is something which used to be there in Oracle Enterprise Manager. I remember generating script while working with the object directly, but I don't know whether it is there in the latest this OCC. What is that? Cloud Control, Oracle Enterprise Manager Cloud Control. Whether it's there or not, I don't know. That you better know that. So this is the login name and mapped user. This is how we create the user. We can drop and we can manage. That is the login and roles part. Let's proceed with the session. After the session, you will be able to attempt the lab sequence also. Session 10, Microsoft SQL Server 2019 security. There are a lot of things which was not covered during the demo, which will be discussed here. Instance level principles, logins, database level principles, schema and database objects, fixed server roles, and database roles. You will learn these features by the end of this lecture. So permission hierarchy in SQL Server 2019. In SQL Server 2019, we have a hierarchical model of security. We categorize them. Principal is actually a name given to a group, user, or Active Directory ID, ADID. Basically, anybody who is able to log in, the credentials. They can be at Windows level, they can be at the server level, and they can be at the database level. At Windows level, they can be Windows group, Windows domain login, and Windows local login. At server level, we can have fixed server role, we can have SQL Server login, we can have user defined fixed server role. As a database level, we can have fixed database role, database user application role, user defined database role, and very new feature since 2014, I think 2012 or 2014 version, is contained user. We have a separate session on contained databases and contained users. The database engine manages a hierarchical collection of entities that can be secured with permissions. These entities are known as securables. The most prominent securables are servers and databases, but discrete permissions can be set at much finer level. SQL Server regulates the action of principals and securables by verifying that they have been granted appropriate permissions. Remember, SQL Server is quite old RDBMS, at least 35 year old. So robust, secure, stable. Only what is changing, what I'm observing it closely, enhanced features based on the latest requirement, the need of the day, they are being implemented. Architecturally, no change possible, and they are not doing it. Similar to like cloud, Oracle Cloud has come out with a new architecture, new concept in cloud, which is taking different projects from open source projects, also integrating own. AWS cannot change. You cannot think of changing the AWS architecture, AWS cloud. You cannot do that. But with new software, new features, new cloud, Cloud is comparatively new, so it's altogether new, great architecture, easy to use. Principals. Principals are entities that can request SQL Server resources. Like other components of SQL Server authorization model, principals can be arranged in a hierarchy. A Windows login is an example of an individual principal, and Windows group an example of principal, that is a collection. Every principal has a security identifier, that is SID. Windows level principals, Windows domain login, Windows local login, server level, SQL Server login, server role, database level, database user, database role, application role. A login in SQL Server 2019. A login is a security principal or an entity that can be authorized, authenticated by secure system. Users need a login to connect to SQL Server. You can create a login based on Windows principal such as domain user or Windows domain group, or you can create a login that is not based on Windows principal such as SQL Server login. As a security principal, permissions can be granted to logins. The scope of a login is the whole database engine. To connect to a specific database on the instance of SQL Server, a login must be mapped to a database user. Point to be noted. If you want a user to be owner of a database, first you need to make the owner, and then you need to add that user inside that database also. That is, we call it as a database user. And we'll see that security will be appearing at two places. One at the server level and second at the database level. Permissions inside the database are granted and denied to the database user, not the login. Permissions that have the scope of the whole instance of the SQL Server, for example, create endpoint permission, can be granted to a login. SQL Server require alter my login or alter login permission on the server for implementing the security, and SQL database require membership in the login manager role. The fixed server roles. The server roles pages list all the possible roles when you are adding an account, when you are creating an account that can be assigned to new login. SQL Server provides server level roles to help you manage the permissions on a server. The permissions that are granted to fixed server roles can not be changed because they are server level. Bulk admin to run bulk insert statement. DB creator to create, alter, drop and restore any database. Disk admin to manage the disk files. Process admin to terminate processes running in an instance of the database engine. Public, all users, groups, roles belong to public server role by default. Security admin to manage logins and their properties. Server admin to change server-wide configuration option and shut down the server. And sysadmin to perform any activity in the database engine. Now, the assignment, the task which is not there in the lab, which is not possible in the lab, and what you can try and you can do is creating at least 7 different users with or 9 different user, 8 different user with 8 different roles, or 4 different user with 2 roles each, and verify after the day, during the day, like backup and restore, whether they are able to perform the activity or not. Without permission, how they behave, what error you get, and with that message what you are getting. Because when you try without that role, you will get error. What error, that take note of that, then grant the role and then verify again. This is something which is impossible to cover in the lab also. I have covered in the lab, but not everything is possible. Therefore, you can spend extra 1 hour or 2 hours on this topic if you want to really learn. So in a nutshell, everything is here. Database level roles and permissions. 11 fixed database roles, 77 database permissions. DB owner, fixed database role. DB data reader, we are talking about database. Control database has all permission in the database. DB data reader, DB data writer, we can this DB data reader can grant these permissions and can use these statements. Data writer can use these statements: insert, update, delete. Database access admin can use these statements. Public can there is no database level permissions specific to this public. Deny data reader, you deny select on this. So you can issue only this type of statement. In a nutshell, if you look at this slide gives you all possible statements where a database level fixed role can issue or can assign, can grant to any other user. Like DDL admin can give any of these alter create statements or permissions or privileges to other users. Then backup operator, backup database, backup log, checkpoint can issue these statements. So these are specific to like security admin, alter any role, create role, alter any application role or view definition. You see in one slide, you got all the roles very clearly with what kind of permissions they can grant to other users with this, if they have these specific roles. So fixed database roles, 11 database roles, DB owner. Members can perform all configuration and maintenance activities on the database and can also drop the database. Security admin can modify role membership for custom roles only and manage permissions. Members of this role can potentially elevate their privileges and their actions should be monitored. Access admin can add or remove access to database for Windows. You have seen the examples in the previous slide. Backup can back up the database. DDL admin can run any DDL data definition language command in the database. Data writer can add, create, change data in all tables. Similarly, data reader, deny data writer, deny data reader means permissions. He can grant or assign permissions to other user privileges to other users. Role management, database level, how can we manage these? For feature wise, SP help DB fixed role. This is metadata. It will return the list of fixed database roles. DB fixed role permission. It is metadata. It will display permissions of a fixed database role. SP help role. It is again metadata. And if you look at the metadata, we have some commands and we have some help stored procedures to give you a right direction. How do we manage these roles? For example, if you want to create role, what is the command? The command is create role. If you want to get information about a role, what is the stored procedure or command? It is stored procedure SP help role. If you want to add a role, uh, create a database role in current database, you can use SP add role. So we have create role and add role. Are they same? Yeah, obviously you can see that they are same role, and you will find these kind of overlaps. The same job can be done with the two commands, with using stored procedure or using a command. That happens. Then grant, deny, revoke, self-explanatory. When you work with the setting, you should think of selected login as principal that can be granted or denied permission on a securable. Select grant on grant connect SQL permission or deny to deny. So this is what you assign when you are creating users. You can decide all these what all permissions and roles you want to assign to a specific user. Database level roles. To easily manage permissions in your database, SQL Server provides several roles that are security principles that group other principles. We have seen the database roles, 11 roles were there. We have even discussed them. They are like groups in Microsoft Windows operating system. Database level roles are database wide in their permission scope. To add or remove database users to database role, you can use add member and drop member options of alter role statement. Analytics platform system, PDW, and Azure's this what is that, Snaps does not support this use of alter role. You can use add role member and drop role member procedures instead. These are stored procedure right from 20 years. I've been seeing these principles, these stored procedures. They are still valid and still working very fine. Some basics never go, they still remain, and you don't see much changes in them. There are two types of database level roles: fixed and user defined. Fixed are defined at the database level and exist in each database. However, members of DB owner can create additional also database role can manage fixed database role membership. You can add any database account and other SQL Server role into database level roles. The permission of user-defined database roles can be customized by using grant, deny, or revoke statements. Server level permissions cannot be granted to database roles. Logins and other server level principals cannot be added to database roles. Public database role, very specific, revising it. Every database user belongs to public database role. When a user has not been granted or denied specific permissions on a securable object, the user inherits the permission granted to public on that object. Database users cannot be removed from public role. To add user Ben to fixed database level role DB data reader, you use this statement alter role name add member Ben as an example of how do we add member to a role. How do we add a user to a role? Get all members of any database role. Quite big statement. You see here, select role dot principal ID as role principal ID, role name as role principal name. This is select and they are coming from multiple tables. You see one is database role members and second is database role members, and then we are joining them. So if we execute this, you will get all members of any database role. Yes, I have one principal role, DB owner, and the membership is this. So this is what I expect. This is what I have in my case. Principal role member, which is there's one role principal ID and principal name is DB owner. Member principal ID is one and member principal name is DBO. There's one in this case. SQL Server Authentication. The checkbox login is logged out. There were checkbox in creating dialog box, if you remember, is only available if the selected login connects using SQL Server Authentication and login has been locked out. This setting is read only. To unlock the login that is locked out, execute alter login with unlock option. That's all for this session. Thank you very much.